You ever wonder why really smart, careful people, people maybe even someone like you, fall for these sophisticated scams? It's a huge question, right? And it gets right to the heart of how our brains work. And the answer is pretty surprising. It's not that they stop thinking, it's that their own intelligence, their own careful thinking, actually gets turned against them. So let's get right into it with a story that I promise will totally change how you look at this stuff. Okay, so picture this. It's a Tuesday. A phone rings. And it's not some robocall, you know? It's a real person on the other end. He sounds calm, professional. He says he's Sergeant David Harris from the county sheriff's department. And the very first thing he does, he uses her name. It seems like a small detail, but it's everything. It instantly makes this entire thing feel personal and, well, real. And then comes the crisis. Her son, he says, has been in a hit and run. I mean, think about that. It's the perfect hook, isn't it? It's absolutely terrifying, but it's also completely believable. It could happen. And here's the really clever part. The sergeant is quick to tell her that nobody was critically hurt. That's such a smart move because it lowers her defenses just enough to stop her from panicking and hanging up. It keeps her on the line, listening. All right, so now they add the pressure. It's a classic ticking clock scenario. He tells her that if she doesn't post bond by 8 p.m. tonight, her son gets transferred to county detention. And that, he says, would take days to sort out. All of a sudden, there's no time to think. There's no time to call her husband or her other son or a lawyer. There's only time to react.
And this is what it was all for. $4,200, a very specific number. And you got to see the thinking here. It's large enough to be serious, right? But for a lot of people, it's just small enough that they could get their hands on it in a true emergency. This is not some random number they plucked out of the air. It's calculated. And so she wired the money to a bail company she had never, ever heard of.
Of course, the call was a lie. Her son, he was totally fine. He was at his desk, at work, completely unaware that any of this was even happening. That whole thing, that whole terrifying emergency, it was all just a fabrication, designed for one and only one purpose, to get her money. And this is where we have to make a really critical shift in how we think about this. The woman, this retired teacher, she wasn't fooled. She wasn't an idiot. In fact, she asked a lot of questions. She was being careful. But her carefulness didn't matter one bit. Why? Because she wasn't in a conversation. She was inside a system. So let's really break this down. What does it even mean to be processed? Well, these professional scammers, they're not just telling a good story. No. They build a machine of manipulation. It's a highly structured sequence where every single step is perfectly designed to push you right into the next one. I mean, check this out. The whole thing, from start to finish, took just 43 minutes. First, you've got the sergeant who creates the crisis and the urgency. Then, just when she starts asking about the money, she's transferred to a bonding clerk whose entire job is to make this weird payment method sound like it's totally normal, just standard procedure. And then, to seal the deal, a supervising lieutenant comes on the line to validate the whole thing. See what they're doing? Each layer is borrowing legitimacy from the real world, and together they create this airtight illusion. Okay, this brings us to a really counterintuitive idea. I mean, we all kind of assume that being smart protects us from this stuff, right? But the data shows the exact opposite. Professional scammers don't avoid smart people. They actively target them. Let's dig into why that is. I mean, the numbers here are just crystal clear. The biggest individual losses from fraud, we're talking over $100,000. They're almost all clustered among educated, high-income individuals. And listen, it's not because they're greedy or careless, not at all. It's because they are confident. They're confident in their own ability to figure things out, to assess a situation on the fly. And that very confidence, that's the vulnerability the scammers are looking for. So here's the absolute key. Think about it. A scammer who has run this exact script thousands of times, they have already heard every single question that you, a careful, intelligent person, are going to ask. And they have a perfect, prepackaged, totally convincing answer for every single one of them. Your own critical thinking skills, they become the very rails they use to guide you down their track. So if intelligence isn't the defense we think it is, then what on earth is? Well, the answer isn't about trying to be smarter or more skeptical about the story they're telling you. It's about learning to ask a completely different kind of question. It's about building a structural defense.
Let's just look at this side by side. On the left, you've got the scam structure. Everything is rushed. Everything is secret. They're asking for weird payment methods like a wire transfer or gift cards. Now look at the right. This is how real institutions work. Their processes are slow, deliberate. It's all public record. They use formal, traceable payment channels. And a real police department would never recommend a specific private company over the phone. I mean, when you see it like this, the difference is just night and day.
And that, right there, is the absolute heart of it. The teacher wasn't tricked by the story. She was trapped by a flawed process. Her mistake wasn't a failure of intellect. It was a failure of not knowing what the right structure, the correct institutional process is supposed to look like. And that's a knowledge gap, not an intelligence gap. Huge difference. Okay, so how do we actually use this? What do we do? Well, it all comes down to arming yourself with one simple protective question. A question that completely shifts your focus away from the emotional, crazy details of the story and onto the cold, hard facts of the process itself. For the teacher in our story, the moment it all clicked came about a week later, when the scammer actually had the nerve to call her back. But for most people, it's that horrible, sinking feeling you get when you check your bank statement, or when you finally tell a friend what happened and you just see it in their face. That's the moment. The moment the whole fake world they built for you just collapses. And look, if that moment ever happens to you or to someone you love, this is the single most important thing I want you to remember. You were not foolish. This was not a personal failure. You were processed. You were targeted by a professional system that is fine-tuned to work on people who are thoughtful and caring and responsible, people exactly like you. So this is it. This is the big takeaway. This is the one question that can be your shield. You have to stop asking yourself, does this story seem real? Of course it seems real. These guys are master storytellers. Instead, you have to ask, is the process right? Does the structure of what I'm being asked to do, the rush, the secrecy, the weird payment method, does any of that match how real institutions actually operate? Trust me, that one question, it changes everything. So, now that you know how to spot a flawed structure, what if I told you there's an even deeper pattern? A simple 4-step pattern that runs underneath almost every scam, every system of influence. And once you see it, you will never be able to unsee it. Join us next time when we break down the SCAM universal pattern.